Howdy folks, and welcome to FoundFlix. On this Knitting Explained, we're looking at the prequel to this year's X, Pearl. We jump back in time several decades into the past, following Pearl's sad life trapped on a farm, tending with her ailing father under her mother's stern eye. Lusting for the glamorous life she's seen in the movies, Pearl's temptations and repressions collide with dangerous results. While Pearl is definitely a prequel to X, impressively they feel very different in many ways. Perhaps most apparently is the shift in styles, from the gritty slasher look of X to a drastically different, almost Oz-esque hyper-reality. It again is very impressive how much Ty West can really recreate the movies from particular eras, and here does something completely different. While I did enjoy X, I have to say that I really loved Pearl. X is more of an ensemble piece, and we don't get into the characters as much, while in Pearl we focus much more on her in particular, and it allows us to really get under the character's skin, adding a lot more layers and complexity to the character. Also, I've always liked Mia Goth, but in Pearl she really gets to shine. There's some serious range on display here, and Mia just absolutely destroys it. She even helped co-write the script with West, and you can tell that they worked in harmony to create something very unique and special for the character. For anyone hoping for some connective tissue back to X, there is quite a bit, even beyond the main character, as some similar themes to X are explored, but through a much earlier lens of time, kind of seeing the beginning seedlings that lead to the world of X in a way. So let's take a trip to the farm with Pearl, breaking down the story, everything we learn about the character, how it connects to X, as well as explaining the ending. A wall of sweeping strings right out of classic cinema swells while we float in on barn doors, in much better days way back in 1918, 61 years before the events of X. There's also a hyper richness to the sky and colors, recalling the saturation of early Technicolor days. In a room, Pearl is seen fixing her ribbons just so, making sure they are in perfect positioning, and see those same dolls wearing makeup still there in 1979. Satisfied, she stands and the lights click off. She's suddenly in a dark void with a spotlight beaming down. She moves gracefully around the room, caught up in her fantasy, until her no-nonsense mom enters. Pearl's facade is instantly shattered, and her mom asks in German about the dress. She took it from her closet without permission, and Ruth really brings her back to reality, barking for her to take off the dress and tend to her duties on the farm as she promised. She stomps over to the barn and carelessly tosses some food for the animals. Yet she seems more interested in chatting them up, telling the cow Charlie all about her big dreams. Farm life may be for him, but not for her. I'm special, she declares. She also hopes to prove her overbearing mother wrong. Once she's a star, Ruth will feel so stupid. She continues that one day everyone is gonna know my name, getting a bleat of approval from Mary. She grabs a pitchfork, addressing them as a great audience, and bounds around the room. It's time for you to see who I really am. She runs on top of a bunch of hay bales, beaming, I'm a star. Well, now we get that just like her future doppelganger, Pearl also longed to be a big star, and also thinks that she has something special exactly like Maxine. Another question is, when did Pearl turn murderous exactly? And it appears that there was always something bubbling within the girl. A lone goose wanders in the barn clucking at her. She gets right up on the creature, staring at it with steely eyes, and stabs it right through with the pitchfork. She leaves the body on it like a deranged kebab and brings it down to the swamp as a snack for their local gator. She holds out the meat in anticipation, smiling as Theta slithers up. She caresses the water and grabs the goose, and seeing that she enjoyed this situation proves that there is indeed something fundamentally wrong with Pearl. The murderous intentions were always there. Ruth continues to tamp out Pearl's fantasies, deeming that dancing is foolishness. Plus, there's things in the real world, like the farm, that she needs to help with, as they have no other hands. A newspaper's headline warns of the still spreading Spanish flu, but there's also word of Allied forces taking control of France. Pearl is excited this could mean the end of the war and that her husband Howard will finally be coming home. Ruth tells her to read it later. She's not interested in hearing about any more dead Germans tonight, her being a German immigrant and all. We see that the flu has hit home via her invalid father, now unable to speak and relegated to a wheelchair. Ruth leads the family in prayer, and they munch down on some corn in silence. Mother orders her in German to help her father, and Pearl dutifully spoons some soup slowly but surely down his gullet. She later longingly reads through some Dear John letters from Howard during his duty, describing the terror they feel every day, along with the horrifying and gruesome sights that he's witnessed. One thing the war has made very clear is that he wants more than ever to come home and make a life together. Till death do us part, he promises. She gives her dad his medicine, telling of her plans excitedly. Tomorrow, she's going into town to get him some more medicine, but that also means that she gets to stop by the pictures. She longs to be up there on the screen one day as a chorus girl, and knows that she's good enough to make it. She splashes her legs, showing off kicks in the tub, giggling to her blank-faced dad. Her mom enters, no fun as usual, and is annoyed at her for using the bathwater, and informs her that the money is on the counter. Don't forget to cover her face, and don't linger too close to anyone, all out of fear of bringing the flu back in the house. And well, we can see why she's so concerned. She bikes to a downtown area bustling with life. Some guy passes by wearing a sandwich board about not settling for a life we don't deserve, which we know was Maxine's life mantra. At the pharmacy, she buys some straight up liquid morphine for her papa. Ah, the good old days. Then it's off to the theater to take in the Palace Follies. She gets settled in the theater hearing someone coughing, accompanied by a gruesome newsreel on the war. She helps herself to some morphine, and it's time for the show to start. A chorus line of girls come out, soundtrack to Wee Wee Marie. After the show, Pearl is absolutely buzzing, actually skipping out of the theater in pure delight. She holds up in an alley and pores over the show's program and is joined by the theater's projectionist. They have a friendly conversation about her desire for dancing, and he encourages that she sure is pretty enough to be in the movies. He invites her to check out a later show free of charge, but she has to get back home. He tells her to stay put and returns with a gift, cutting out a frame from the film just for her. She's concerned people might notice, but he knows it's only a frame, it won't make much difference. He again gives her some more positive encouragement. She should be proud for helping her family, but urges her to also not forget about her own life along the way. It's like he's saying exactly what she wants to hear. Interesting. She rides back home with the movie's images freshly dancing in her mind. The wind picks up, blowing the frame out of her pocket to her distress. She jumps off the bike and ventures into the cornfields to hopefully find it. She pushes through the rows and makes it to a clearing, discovering a scarecrow. She ascends the ladder, coming face to face with the straw man, and asks him to dance. She tosses him down on the ground and dons his hat, noticing the guy really looks like the scarecrow from Wizard of Oz, which I'm sure is no coincidence. She leads him in an elaborate waltz, spinning around and totally immersed in her fantasy world. She gets really into it, swinging and leaping around with her hay-filled partner. She concludes with a big dip and smooch right on the lips, even getting some tongue action in there as well. Woo! She's still in her fantasy with her eyes closed. And surprisingly, when she opens them, in place of the scarecrow's face is a projectionist. Oh, is that who you were secretly fantasizing about? I'd wager as much. She tries to deny her feelings, screaming to the scarecrow that she's married. But she can't help herself and proceeds to make pretend sexy times with the scarecrow, who again actually represents the projectionist. As she climaxes, the music does as well, her screaming in pleasure that echoes throughout the cornfields. At home, she's greeted with disdain as usual from her mother, chiding her for taking so long. Then when noticing the hat, she warns not to bring it inside. It could be covered in germs. She sends her to clean herself up along with her father. She scrubs up, detailing all about the picture to her silent pops. She dreams of the charmed life of the dancers in the movies. But it doesn't come easy. They must be absolutely perfect in every way. Her dad only groans a pained wheeze in response. To test how vegetated he really is, she gives his hand a curious pinch to no reaction. She whispers to him, wondering if he really is even still in there anymore. She runs a finger along his face and then wraps her hand around his neck, choking him. Still, her dad can only just sit there helpless. It's time for another awkward family dinner of stew and corn. Ruth raises an issue with Pearl, the missing 8 cents and change from her trip to town. Pearl excuses that she bought some candy, and immediately her mom yanks the soup away, telling her they don't have any extra food to spare. That candy will be her dinner. Pearl attempts to leave in a huff, but her mom stops her as she didn't excuse her. She details just how dire things are on the farm. There's barely any money to feed themselves, and the times have changed. She accuses Pearl of being careless. It's literally up to the two of them for them to survive. The only reason that they're not sick or famished is because of her tending with things. Pearl argues that she is careful, but Ruth disagrees. She's always lost in her fantasies, calling it weak, and orders her to stop with all the dancing nonsense. Yet Pearl cannot be dissuaded from her dreams and prays that night to God to make her the biggest star in the world so she can finally get away from the farm. That's it, just being a star, not Howard's safety or dad's health or anything like that. Just me being a star is all that truly matters, obviously. And maybe there is a chance it could come true. Seeing a shooting star going by out the window when she tucks into bed. Maybe it will make her wish a reality. Regardless, it's back to lowly farm life for now. They're paid a visit by Mitzi and her mom, dropping off a pig for the family. Mitzi, we find out, is Howard's sister, meaning also Pearl's sister-in-law. She seems pleasant enough, saying that she's hopeful for them to get along. Although she is worried about her brother. They even found a way for him to skirt his duty, but Howard refused. She moans, "That's Howie for you. First he wanted to be a farmer, and then he ships off to the army." She also brings up some exciting and potentially game-changing news for Pearl. There's going to be auditions for dancing girls down at the local church. If they get the gig, they'll get to go on a 7-city tour around the state. Not exactly the biggest star-making break, but still, it could be the start of something bigger. She returns to her room and did keep the germ-ridden hand after all, where she also hides her Palace Follies program. Her fantasy, we see, is only growing stronger, now picturing herself in black and white footage just like the others in the movie, also providing a potential glimmer of a future if all goes according to her plan. She sneaks another dress from her mother's closet and tests out the look, also including the hat, to her satisfaction. satisfaction. She sneaks out into the night to visit her new projectionist pal. He's happy to see her back so soon and guides her through the bowels and behind the scenes of the theater in a way. He takes her to the projection room where he also appears to live. She's in awe of his job, getting to watch movies all day for free, and he agrees it's not so bad a gig. Over drinks, she mentions what he had said earlier about not living her own life and brings up her upcoming audition. He thinks it sounds interesting, but she's worried about her performance. What if she's not perfect? As always, he is blindly encouraging, telling her if you want something badly enough, don't let anything get in your way. He offers to play her something, and she just wants to watch Palace Follies again. He suggests something a little more spicy, something else no one has seen. He picked it up back in France when he was in the service. She inquires if he has a home, and he describes himself as bohemian. He can pack up and leave whenever he likes. To Pearl, this sounds like the ultimate dream, and he concurs, as long as he never wakes up. He cranks the projector to life, and Pearl is surprised when things start turning naughty. That's right, it's a certified snuff film. She's never seen anything like it, and he tells her that there's tons of these underground stag films out there, and it's not exactly legal, not here anyway, but he's certain that it will be one day in the future. People would pay an arm and a leg for a picture like this. He can see the future to a degree, believing that these movies will lead to a revolution, one that he intends on capitalizing on. He finds it all fascinating, as it's reality being presented here, seeing people for who they truly are. This is another very strong tie back into X, as we're seeing the kind of beginnings of this new kind of snuff film. At the time it was illegal, and even the projectionist sees the potential opportunity for making money here. The times were certainly more restricted and buttoned up back then, which of course is at the core of X in '79. It's right at the verge of that adult film explosion, and Wayne, just like the projectionist, is pouncing on the opportunities seen with these kinds of films. Well, to make money, really. But this idea of presenting the real world does not sit well with Pearl. She is not a fan of the real world, or really where she lives more specifically. It's simple to him. Just leave. There's a road right out there that'll lead out of town. She wants to wait for her parents to pass on, but he considers that by then it may be too late. You know, in life, you don't get a second chance. She moans that she wishes for them to just die, and he's a little put off. She shrugs it off as nothing, and is just happy to have someone else to talk to for a change. It's lonely out there on the farm, she moans, and sometimes starts to worry that she's different from everyone else. He scoffs. Why would she want to be like everyone else in the first place? Pearl isn't sure, but it seems to be more peaceful to her. It's as though Pearl does in some ways recognize that something is wrong with her, and can identify how truly she is different from others. She brings up what he said earlier. Does he really think she could be on the big screen? He still does, and she says that she would do anything to make it happen. He has an even bigger idea for her. After the pandemic ends, she should go to Europe. The arts are so alive there, and she could even be in stag pictures too. He smirks that he would definitely watch her. She is inevitably forced to return to the reality of the farm and sneaks her way back inside. She hears her mother sobbing uncontrollably in bed, but ultimately decides to ignore it. After she tucks in, a photo of Howard catches her gaze, and Pearl is obviously feeling guilty over her new crush, asking what he thinks he's looking at. She's had enough of the obstacles stopping her from her dreams and decides to take matters into her own hands. First step, getting rid of her papa. She wheels him out to the gator dock, dangling him over the edge enticingly. Theta is on the hunt, and Pearl reveals to him that she'll be leaving soon, and admits that to her it's easier if she didn't feel that he was abandoning him. But yeah, feeding him to a gator is fine, no problem I guess. She blames this turn on Howard. He was supposed to take her away, and then he left. She loves her father, but knows this is no way to live, the gator getting closer and closer to chomping distance. But her plan is foiled by Ruth showing up, asking what she's doing here. Pearl innocently replies she was just talking to Daddy. She coldly sends her back to the house, and Pearl can't take it anymore, shrieking, why does she hate her? Ruth argues that she only wants what's best for us, but Pearl wants to know when she gets what she wants for a change. But her mom knows the reality. One day that she'll understand life isn't about getting what you want, but living with what you have. If your dream never comes true, you'll never be happy in your life. Left alone, she's curious about Theta, and discovers a nest of eggs in a shallow pool nearby, meaning there will be gators occupying this swamp for a long time. 60 years later, and still putting those gators to work. She retrieves a single egg and stows it away up in the barn, yet she can't stay away for some reason. She picks it up, giving it the once over, and has a vision of Howard coming home on the road and waving. She imagines the egg is actually Howard, and when crushing it, he explodes in a blast of blood and gore. Well, now we know where her head is at regarding him at this point. At yet another Sue and corn dinner, things bubble over between the mother and daughter. Ruth found her Palace Follies program, and she reminds her of the threat of germs. She tells her about the dance auditions, and she puts her foot down. She is going. Why? Her mother wants to know. To find out if she's good enough for something more than this. Ruth accuses her of being ungrateful. She's had food in her belly and a roof over her head her whole life, all thanks to her parents' sacrifices. Or is it perhaps that Pearl thinks her parents are beneath her as well? Yeah, I mean, obviously. Pearl pours her heart out. If she ends up spending the rest of her days here, then fine. But she just wants this one chance to prove herself. She promises if it doesn't work out, She'll give up on her dream and never speak of it again. I'm not so sure if that's even possible. Pearl pleads that she has no idea of what she's capable of, but Ruth begs to differ. She's seen her in her private moments when she thinks no one else is watching, and warns that she can't hide her true self forever. They will notice eventually and be just as frightened as she is. Based on that, it sure sounds like Ruth has seen that darker side of Pearl that no one else has really seen. We did see her kill that goose at the very least, and there is much about her behavior that would raise concerns. And now we understand a little bit more about why Ruth is so strict all the time. Pearl thinks she's wrong, and Ruth can only laugh. In that case, what a fine woman you'll become, leaving your mother to dance with whores and no doubt spread more disease. She points out what happened to her father and loses her temper, calling her behavior sinful, tearing up the program. Ruth is certain that there is evil at Pearl's core and feels at this point she can't even in good conscience let her leave the farm ever again. Ruth has regrets of her own. For example, her father. She was supposed to be his wife, not his mother. Pearl musters a small sorry, and Ruth loses it. She grabs a big knife and puts it up to her dad. Is this what you want? Why don't I just kill him for you? Then she would be free to pursue her selfish dreams. They could even both go to the auditions together, now that both their husbands are gone. What about us getting what we want? She yells, stabbing the knife deep into the table. Ruth has reached her limits with her kid. If she wants to go, then go. But when she fails, reiterating that she certainly will, she wants her to remember what it feels like right now, because that's how she feels every time she looks at her daughter. Yeesh. Not very nice. She spits that she's had nearly everything taken from her. What more does she want? Pearl croaks weakly. She just doesn't want to end up like her is all. Mom approaches her and smacks her hard across the face. Pearl shrieks that she hates her and slaps her back. Ruth grabs her, calling her a harlot, no better than her. She disagrees, screaming, I am better than you. The world is gonna know my name. The two tussle around the room, and in the struggle, Ruth leans back into the fireplace, setting her dress ablaze. It quickly spreads across her entire body, and Pearl sort of helps by dumping a pot of boiling water on her, which does put out the fire, but probably didn't feel so good. Pearl coldly drags her smoldering mother down into the basement, bonking her head with each step. She comes back to her father, now looking paralyzed in fear after witnessing that entire incident. This pushes her back into the projectionist's arms, romantically whisking her inside. She drifts back into her fantasy world, and the audience applauds her performance. They then rise to their feet for a standing ovation, even throwing roses. Pearl absorbs all the love gratefully with open arms. Then things get weird, seeing Howard, her dad, and mom with burned up face amongst the crowd. The reality starting to seep into her dream world. She shoots awake, still in the projectionist's bed, and gets ready in a hurry. It's the day of her big audition, and she needs to practice her routine to make sure it's perfect. She also needs more of what he does best, asking again if she's pretty enough. He smirks that not much has changed in the last 24 hours, but for her it sure has. He lures her back to bed with her hat and gives her a passionate kiss. He offers to at least drive her home, to which she obliges. On the drive home, she's looking a bit tense, and they pass by another masked soldier on the road. She stares intently as they pass, leaving him curious if she knows him. She isn't so sure, and he complains that it's hard to know anyone nowadays with the mask that people are wearing. An obvious double meaning there, not just for physical masks obscuring her features, but also metaphorical ones like the fake one Pearl presents to others. At the farm, she asks him to wait behind so she can check out what this scene is like inside. Her poor dad is still sitting there helpless and terrified. She profusely apologizes and rolls him into another room. She also checks on her mom, but hears no sounds from below. Out front, the projectionist is drawn to an alarming sight. That same rejected pig from Mitzi's family is still on the porch, but is now rotting and covered in maggots. A fitting visual representation of what's happened to the farm. She tells him it's okay to come in now and introduces him to her father. He politely takes off his hat, telling him it's a pleasure to meet you. She drags him upstairs and attempts to seduce him while continuing to discuss their future plans together. She wants off this farm forever, but from what he can tell, it doesn't seem that bad, really. Tell me more about Europe, she asks, and keeps kissing him. But there's a thudding that ruins the mood, and he finally can't take it anymore, pushing her off. He scorns her for ignoring it. It could be her father, for Christ's sakes. She knows that's not the case, and glumly asks him not to go. He's starting to see past that mask, asking what is wrong with her. Nothing, she insists. The thudding continues, and he enters the dining room confused by the ears of corn still all over the floor. Pearl appears, startling him, and blames the noise on the dog. It got sick, so she put him down in the root cellar. No big deal. She changes the subject, pulling him away with excitement. She has something to show him. She introduces him to all of her barnyard pals, which she calls her best audience. She named them all after her favorite movie stars, and over time has put on so many shows for them. But now it's time to move on. You know what they say about showbiz. If you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. He starts growing a bit concerned by her behavior and asks the dog's name. She slips and says they don't have a dog. Whoops. He reminds her that she literally just said that they did, and she struggles to find a good excuse. He sees this as a good opportunity to leave, and she's beside herself. He tries to play things cool. He just gotta get to work, and she needs to rehearse, right? He gives her a peck on the cheek, telling her it was nice to see her. She can tell something is off, asking what happened? What made him grow cold so suddenly? What did he see? Well, that sounds pretty incriminating. He shrugs that he didn't see anything, and she calls him a liar. She knows he's lying because she sees things deeply more than others. He tries again to leave, telling her he'll see her later. When? She demands to know. It's just an expression. And the shoe drops. He's not really going to take her to Europe, is he? Well, why not? What did she do wrong? She primally shrieks to tell her the truth. He divulges that she is legit scaring him and wishes her good luck once more with her audition and walks off. That's not good enough for her, seeing another chance to leave the farm slipping away. He hops in his car and stares over in concern to the barn. Pearl is already there on the other side, giving him a big old surprise. She screams at the top of her lungs, "Nothing is going to keep her here," and jabs him with her favorite pitchfork. She loses her balance and he collapses on the shift, kicking it into drive. She chases after, screaming, "Nothing is going to slow her down. Not you, not Howard, not nobody." He tumbles out of the car and she takes the pitchfork right through his face. After really thinking about the movie and its story and everything, I started focusing in on the blossoming relationship between her and the projectionist. Yes, this is the only name he's ever given, and based on how a lot of the movie is sort of taking place in Pearl's hyper-reality, I started wondering if the projectionist was actually a figment of her imagination. Going through their interactions, he is constantly encouraging her no matter what, and really putting those bigger thoughts of getting out of here and going to Europe in her head. It feels like he is kind of the idealized version of the man that she wants, constantly complimenting and fawning all over her and giving her exactly what she wants. She even has that earlier moment of his face appearing on the scarecrow, so she is for sure fantasizing about him in some way. So based on everything, it stands to reason that he never even really existed. I even thought of that with his lack of name. He's the projectionist, but it's actually Pearl projecting that perfect man persona that she wants onto him. Of course, this all goes awry when he finally sees under her mask that real her that she is trying so desperately to hide. But the mask has completely dropped at this point. The evil has effectively taken over Pearl. She next checks up on her mama, who has climbed all the way up the stairs. She throws her own words back in her face to remember what she feels like right now and kicks her right back down the stairs. She turns to her dad and gets him cleaned up, but still covered in fresh blood. Not sure how much that's helping. And her dad can only tremble and fear the entire time. She notices this and complains about looking at her like that, but it is ultimately warranted. She dons another of her mom's dresses and gets all dolled up for the audition. She's so confident that it's gonna go well, she even has her bags packed up ready to go. There is no alternative beyond her landing that gig. She asks her dad's opinion on the look, and he stays silent, but the single tear streaming down his cheek says plenty. She asks to dispense with him as well, grabbing a pillowcase and first assuring him that he is loved before snuffing him out for good. She disposes of the projectionist car in the swamp, leaving him for gator food, and she also gives a big dramatic au revoir Johnny to him on the way out. She makes it to the audition, and Mitzi is relieved. Pearl apologizes, saying that she has some chores to do around the house. Yeah, I'll say. Mitzi notices the suitcase, which she says is just what she'll need for the road. She's impressed by her confidence, but the stakes here are pretty high. Rumor has it they're only taking one girl from each town. It has to be me, Pearl says sternly. Mitzi chuckles she must have accidentally said that out loud. If not you, then me, right? But Pearl only repeats, it has to be me. Again, there is no other option for her at this point. So geez, let's hope it works out. They call the girls and make their way down the line, and with their turns approaching, Mitzi reveals how nervous she truly is. Pearl isn't scared whatsoever, and her sister-in-law asks them to switch places, as she's too afraid to even go on stage right now. She is happy to do so, and Mitzi calls her a good friend, attempting to calm her frayed nerves. Am I? Pearl genuinely asks. And Mitzi politely chuckles, yes. And now it's Pearl's turn. Mitzi encourages her to show her what she can do. I'll show them all, Pearl vows. She enters the room, and the situation appears overwhelming for her as she surveys the judges. The lady motions for her to, get on stage, duh. Pearl strolls out dramatically, taking her place on an X mark on the stage. Remind you of anything? The judges somberly await her performance, and the piano player tinkles a jaunty upbeat tune. Pearl struts her stuff with a big beaming smile, twirling and dancing around all over the stage. Her fantasy takes over and she is transported to the front lines of war. A group of girls come out and join her for some classic chorus line kicks while airplanes roar and bombs explode behind them. She leads them out as patriotic fireworks pop off. She sways her arms around and the other girls leave her for the triumphant conclusion, and the curtains close behind her. She does a big final twirl, hearing applause and staring up hopefully, although reality rears its ugly head to shatter her dreams for good. A judge thanks her limply and lets her down with a simple, it's gonna be a no. Pearl can't even comprehend the words, croaking out, pardon? He apologizes, she simply isn't what they had in mind. She gets more upset. That was the best dancing she's ever done. He agrees that it was quite nice, but they already have a bunch of girls like her in the troupe. They want somebody more all-American, young and blonde, someone different with that X factor. Well, there you go. Just like with X, the parallel stories of Pearl and Maxine hinge on this same concept. It seems the key difference is that Maxine actually has this elusive star power, while Pearl unfortunately does not. She still can't believe it, as fantasy and reality begin to blur, seeing her mother and others on the jury. She cries to just give her one more chance. I'm a star! She keeps screaming for help as she is literally dragged off the stage. Her dream is dead. Bummer. Afterwards, she cries in frustration and is joined by Mitzi, who offers to take her home. The pig is now even more rotting, and Mitzi is all like, that can't be that pig we brought, right? Pearl is defeated, taking a seat at the table, and laments that her mom was right after all. She's never gonna get off this farm. Mitzi is curious where she wants to go, and when told Europe, she doesn't understand. It would be all in ruin by the time she got there. Thanks World War I, but also shows how naive Mitzi really is. Regardless, she downplays the whole dancing troupe thing. It's just for a church group. They don't know the first thing about quality dancing. Pearl has bigger things on her mind than just the dance troupe and really spills her guts to Mitzi. In a bravado monologue from Mia Goth lasting 6 minutes or so, unbroken. Perhaps it's because she sees her as a true friend, or perhaps she can no longer hide who she truly is. She's worried that something is really wrong with her, literally missing a part of her that everyone else has. Mitzi asks if she's talked to Howard about all this, but she hasn't told another soul before now. So Mitzi suggests to try some role playing that she'll play Howard. What would she say to him right now? Pearl plays along, divulging her true feelings. She hates him so much for leaving her, and even sometimes hopes that he dies in the war. She mentions the idea of being with other men, which she probably doesn't want to hear about, but she was so lonely and curious. It was only the one time that anything happened, and she regretted it immediately, presumably referring to the potentially imaginary projectionist. All she wants now is to go back to the way things were. She starts getting teary-eyed because she doesn't think there is a way to go back after what she's done. Mitzi asks what she's done, but Pearl is on a roll and is undeterred. She knows that Howie is a good person and made sure to love him with her whole heart. She never wanted him to feel jealous. She knows that aching all too well. For her, this feeling especially comes when others' lives come too easily. The truth is, she is finally ready to accept that she is not a good person. Mitzi grows uncomfortable, but she continues, revealing her plan from the beginning regarding her beau. Right from their meeting when he was hired as a family farmhand, she had designs on him. Sure, he was hardworking like all the other farmhands, but something made him different. He had a nice, comfortable place to return whenever he wanted. He was from somewhere. This is what she has been so desperate to have, and for Pearl, Howie was her ticket off the farm. So she worked extra hard to make sure he never saw who she really was, and it worked like a charm too. The way he fell for her was something right out of the pictures, but she did not get her happy ending. He was more than content with farm life and had no intent of ever leaving, which made her angry. Even more so, she found it selfish and cruel after everything she had done for him, which actually sounds like what her mom was complaining about. Not appreciating her sacrifices only to do the same thing to her. She even surprisingly was carrying his baby at one point, but she had no interest in being a mother. To her, it felt more like a sickness suckling on her, needing her like animals in the barn. She was terrified by the idea of being in charge of another life and was relieved when it died. It was simply one less weight keeping her here. Then the war came and Howard left too, and she languishes on why he left her. She hates feeling pathetic and is curious if others do feel like her. Referencing Misty, she feels that the Lord has been generous to her and her family, while in her case, he never answers her prayers, and because of this wants to know just what is wrong with her. She again reiterates all that she really wants is to not end up like her mama. She wants to be up on the screen like the other dancing girls. She wants to be perfect, to be loved, and that at least would make up for all of this suffering she's been through. She wakes up sometimes in a cold sweat and wonders, is this really it? Where she belongs? This leads to call herself a failure. She's not pleasant or friendly, not smart, funny, or confident enough. Again, she's just what her mama accused her of being, weak. She doesn't understand why her family was so favored more than her own, but also is worried about what happens if Howard eventually returns home. She knows all the bad things that she's done, even if they did feel good at the time, she admits, and goes on to divulge how this has really been part of her nature the whole time. She tells her that at first it was only animals smaller than her that she killed, nothing that could hurt her back. To her, it felt good killing them and got easier over time. Yet it was different lately with the projectionist and her mother and her poor old dad. He didn't deserve his unfortunate fate. She now realizes that her mama did mean well. She just wanted her to feel safe. And overall, that's what she's been seeking as well. Pearl sniffles that she's made a mess of everything, but vows with fresh resolve that she can still make things right before Howard comes home. Maybe they can turn this farm into a real home like he wanted, and things will finally be different. All she wants is to stay with him and accept who she is at her core. They can really love each other, and she at least promises to do that for him, as long as he meant the till death do us part thing. After everything, for her, it would be enough with just the two of them on the farm. She finally looks up to Mitzi to see her reaction after the damning emotional info dump, and she decides it is time to get a move on. Pearl is presented with a pivotal crossroad. She opened herself up more than ever before to what she thought was a friend, but she is too damaged and deranged at her core. Pearl recognizes the change in her friend. "Are you frightened of me?" she asks. Mitzi severely shakes her head. No, of course not, telling her she's not sick or anything. Pearl smiles and thanks her for the kind words. She's happy that she got the part in the troupe. She deserves it. Mitzi plays dumb. What? She didn't get the part. Mitzi too is showing her own mask here, still denying the part that she got out of fear. Pearl regurgitates her words. "If it's not me, it's you, right?" Mitzi maintains that she didn't get it, and Pearl just wants her to stop pretending. She does drop the axe and can't contain her smile anymore. She did get the part, she reveals. reveals, and she just happens to also fit those specific parameters the judge were looking for, something different, all-American and blonde and all that. It's not really about talent at this point, you know? Pearl admits defeat and wishes her well on her tour around the state. Yet for her, this all fits into her jaded view. Once more, the privileged person has been rewarded, while she's been tossed unceremoniously to the side. Naturally, Mitzi at this point really wants to get out of here, but there's a worry that she could reveal Pearl's secrets. She assures her they can keep all this between them, and she can fix all this before Howie comes back. But Mitzi is beyond negotiation. She walks outside looking shell-shocked, and soon Pearl follows after. She goes for an axe, purposefully stalking after her, and Mitzi screams for help, quickening her pace. She trips, allowing Pearl to catch up and jam the axe into her back. She keeps running, and Pearl hacks at her friend until she's felled. Mitzi pleads to spare her life. She'll do anything. But Pearl echoes her mother's words once more. It's not about what she wants anymore, but making the best of what she has. She brings down the axe upon her, taking her last friend and sister-in-law out for good. In search of any kind of solace, she descends down into the dark basement. She follows her mother's nail marks in the dirt until coming across her decaying body. I mean, she did pretty much leave her to die. Pearl moves her body into a position to lie next to her and places her limp arm around her for some snuggles. Ruth begins to sing a German lullaby, and Pearl takes her body back upstairs. She brushes her hair tenderly, which falls off in horrifying, gruesome clumps. Not so wholesome after all there. There's more lingering evidence to deal with, starting with dismembering Mitzi and feeding her to the gator. As for her parents, she creates a disturbing dinner display featuring both of their corpses. And what's for dinner? Rotting pig, of course. When going to retrieve her dead mother, she suddenly is back to normal in appearance, and they share a weirdly tender moment, telling each other in German, "I love you." At this point, Pearl has completely succumbed to her fantasy. That's all I really wanted my mama to say, but I haven't exactly been the ideal daughter either. Appropriately, Howard is just now about to return from the Great War, and is dropped off just outside the farm. He excitedly runs inside, searching for Pearl, and arrives to the disturbing dinner scenes with all kinds of grody, rotting food on display. Pearl joins him, blankly telling him she's so happy he's home. She flashes a big smile that she holds as long as possible, until she more or less begins to completely break down. The smile grows more strained and disturbing, and then tears start streaming down her still smiling face. Well, she's totally lost it, that's for sure. What's even more impressive is that Howard actually stayed with her after coming home to all this death and madness, as we see they are still indeed on the farm 60 years later, unfortunately meaning she never did leave the farm after all. But hey, maybe those decades in between weren't so bad, that is until those pesky sexed up kids showed up in '79 and ruined everything. The story presented here, and then where we pick up decades later, shows us a further evolution of Pearl over time. Her dream's now dead, and after pretty much losing her mind, she becomes ultimately jaded, having to live with the meager offerings of her simple life. At least she had Howard, I guess. Could have been worse. Getting off the farm was the one thing that she really wanted in her life, and I'm sure the realization this won't ever happen only made her sink even deeper into darkness. She does also more or less become her mother in a lot of interesting ways, as just like Ruth, she is resentful of the younger generation and the squandering of their time. Even just as her mother accused her of being a harlot, Elder Pearl accuses Maxine of the same. Also like Ruth, she doesn't understand the younger generation. It's a kind of cascade of repression and misunderstanding that continues over generations. Let's hope Maxine is able to break the trend in her upcoming 80s set sequel. With that, we have reached the conclusion of this evening explained for Pearl. Don't forget, before we go, you can send me requests for any movies or TV shows you'd like to see me explain by sending them my way on any of my social media accounts at FoundFlix. What did you think of Pearl and its ending? Did you prefer this or X? And what do you hope to see in the sequel, Maxine? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Thanks for watching FoundFlix. See you next time.